Who's your daddy and what does he do? That's the question that Arnold Schwarzenegger asked his kindergartners in the late 80s comedy Kindergarten Cop, and it's a question that every single one of us should ask too. Who is our daddy and what does he do? The prevailing opinion in Christianity today is that you're essentially an orphan until such time as you come to a knowledge, an acceptance of the truth of the Christian gospel, and then you become a child of God. You then become his offspring. And while there certainly may be some experiential elements that we don't receive or experience, I should say, the full enjoyment of that paternity, of that relationship, until we become aware of it, it nevertheless remains the fact that you were his child, you are his child, and ever shall be his child, regardless of what you believe about him. Your paternity is never predicated on your belief in your father. He is your father simply because he is, both in the natural and in the spiritual. God is all of mankind's father, even if he doesn't realize it. The universal fatherhood of God is one of the primary doctrines of the Trinity that the entire Christian faith has historically been built on, yet we teach it so backwardly. I want us to take a look at a passage that really lays this out well. You probably have encountered it before. It's in Acts chapter 17, and we're going to read a large chunk of scripture here, but I'm going to go pretty quickly. It's going to be a brief video, so hang with me. Acts 17, we're going to look at verse 22. Then Paul stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus. The Areopagus were basically the governing council. It actually is location, but it was the governing council of Athens. So think of this as a large city council meeting. And Paul is there, and he's addressing the city council of Athens. And he says, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and examined your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Therefore, what you worship is something unknown, I now proclaim to you." What is Paul saying there? He's saying that in ignorance, in not knowing, they had actually been worshiping the one true God all along. Did you know it's possible to worship Christ in ignorance? It's possible to worship him and not even know you're doing it? According to Paul, it is. Verse 24, "The God who made the world and everything in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, he does not live in temples made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. Everything you have came from your Father. Everything you have came from God. He gave us life, he gave us breath, and everything else. All that we enjoy was a gift freely given by him. And as we just saw, it's irrespective of you accepting it. It simply is. It is a proclamation, much more so than an invitation. Verse 26, "From one man he made every nation of men," that'd be Adam, "that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their lands." Verse 27, "God intended that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being." Who is he talking to? Paul's not talking to a bunch of Christians who've already come to some awareness of who the Father is. No. He's talking to a bunch of pagan Athenians. These are polytheists worshiping a litany of gods based on specific needs. They essentially had patron gods of different conditions, different family systems, different lines, lineages, and you worship them accordingly as to what your needs were. He's talking to them, and he tells them that it is in God they live and move and have their being, that mankind collectively finds its purpose in the God who formed them. Even again, remember, even if they've been worshiping that God in ignorance all along, not recognizing him for who he is. Let's read on. This is such an important verse. Verse 29, or verse 28. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, being offspring of God, we should not think the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by man's skill and imagination. We are his offspring. Again, he's talking to pagans. He is not talking to converted Christians, believers. Paul's talking to individuals who had no knowledge of the triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit. And yet he still tells them, you're his offspring. And even beyond that, he uses the inclusive term we, meaning Paul is of that same flock, that same offspring, that same family, and so are you. And so I say the same thing to you watching this today. We are his offspring. You and me and everyone we encounter is a child of God. So who is our daddy? The Father of all mankind. And what does he do? He gives us life, breath, and everything else we have. He is a God who gives and does not take. He restores, he doesn't destroy. He builds, he doesn't destruct. That is your daddy. And that's what he does.